Alex, thanks for your time. Abysmal weather here gives us a good chance to have a natter about your career, your decision to retire from international cricket this week. I suppose the obvious question to start with, why and why now?
I did make my mind up a few weeks ago. It wasn't on the back of Stu doing it a few days ago. I had made my mind up, but I feel like winning a World Cup final is the highest of highs for me, and to get to do that after I thought I'd never get that chance after what happened in 2019. I think it's rare as a sportsman to get to bow out at the top and on your terms, and yeah, that's probably the main reason that led to it. And also, being in my mid-30s now, 34, 35, without a central contract, it becomes difficult to play bilateral series and stuff like that, missing out on the franchise gigs. So it becomes like a financially tough decision the older you get. It's very different when you're in your 20s and you're pushing for those central contracts and a long England career. But sort of when you're in the twilight like I am now, it feels like the franchise stuff is just the route I wanted to go down. So it just feels like the right time.
Was it something that you spoke to the selectors or Rob Key about? Because I'm thinking ahead of the selection for the last World T20, it was said that you rang Rob up and said, why do I keep being ignored? So was this something you had a conversation around? Because obviously the 50 over World Cup is just around the corner as well.
I rang up Rob a couple of weeks ago. I'd made my mind up for a while. I
Right.
sort of knew in the back of my head, even going all the way back to the final, I thought that could be my last game. But I pondered on it for a while and obviously let it all die down after the final, that high of the final, and thought I'd give it some time. And then, sort of halfway through the summer, I knew it was my time. So I rang up Rob. I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. I was in Canada. And told him the news, and he just said he was happy for me that I managed to get.
Did he try and change your mind?
No, he didn't seem too persuasive. I think I was interrupting his driving range session. He was at Sunningdale on the driving range. I think he was just trying to get the conversation done with, so he'd get back to shanking it round. It's I phoned him up maybe 2 weeks ago when I was in Canada, and very very content with it.
So 150 caps plus, all told might be 156 exactly. How do you look back on your England career in its entirety?
Yeah, very proud. I mean, if you had told me as a 16-year-old or as a kid dreaming to play for England that you get the chance to do it 150 times across 3 formats, I'd have snapped your hand off for it. It's incredible. So I can look back with a lot of proudness. Obviously, some disappointing moments along the way, some highs and a lot of lows as well. So obviously, a few things if I could do differently, if I could go back in time, I'd change a few things. But I can look back with a lot of proudness, and also delighted that I got another chance to have a crack at a World Cup.
Yeah, in your statement, which you put out on Instagram, I think you said highest of highs and lowest of lows. Might just reflect on some of those. I mean, you talked about some of the lows and the matters of regret. Is that something, even now, even though we're talking maybe 6 years on from Bristol, 4 years on from the World Cup, is that something that still nags away at you or not?
Getting as time goes on, less and less. Obviously, when it all happened, it was horrendous. But the more the clock ticks, the more you kind of move on with your life. But obviously, looking back now, there's things I'd handle differently. There's conversations I'd have and ways I'd do things slightly different that may have led to a different outcome. But I can't change that now. And all that happening then has got me to where I am now. And I'm very proud with everything I've achieved and where I am with my cricket on and off the field. So there's things I would change, but I don't want to dwell on it too much.
Sure. Just one last question about it. I mean, do you think that's one of the challenges for sportsmen that, sport is a thing that you have to do when you're young, physically young and in your prime, but wisdom and knowledge comes a little bit later. And I'm sure it would be the ideal for all of us to say, I wish I could play with the wisdom and knowledge of a 40 or 50-year-old, but still have a 20-year-old's body. That's not given to a sportsman, and therefore it does present some challenges along the way.
100%, yeah, it does. As a sportsman, you've got a very limited time for where you can make your money, and as you said, the mind develops a lot later than that. So there's obviously things I got wrong in my 20s when I was playing for England off the field. But I can't change that now. Obviously, with my wisdom and looking back at it now, there's things I'd handle very differently. But unfortunately, that can't be done as a sportsman. So nothing I can do about it. But very content with where I am now.
And some of the highs. I mean, the 2 big innings at Trent Bridge for England against Pakistan in 2016, against Australia in 2018, and then the World Cup just concluded that you obviously finished with on a great high. Would they be the particular high points for you?
I think so. Those 3 games, those 3 games that you mentioned, and probably the India semi-final as well. Yeah. To do that with Joss against the biggest cricketing nation in the world was an incredibly special feeling. So to do that against India, and then probably the 100 against Sri Lanka at the World Cup, the first T20 100 for England at a World Cup was a very special feeling. So I'd say those stand out, but Yeah, those 2 games at Trent Bridge in front of a home crowd where, we got the 2 record scores and obviously contributed very well myself. So, those are some incredible highs.
You started your career, I think you made your first class debut in 2008, would I be right in saying?
I think so.
Yeah.
I probably should know, but I think it was in 2008 or 2009.
So it's around about the time that the IPL is starting up, maybe just afterwards. So you're starting your career as the game is on the cusp of fundamental change. Would I be right in assuming that when you were a kid growing up, that still Test match cricket was seen as the pinnacle and was still the pinnacle for you?
Definitely, yeah. As a youngster, for sure. I mean, T20 had barely just come out of its inception. Was it 2004? I think it started. So, as a kid growing up, Test cricket was always a thing. But I always, even as a kid, I was always looking to play shots. I was always looking to tee off very, very unconventional and not the prettiest technically, and it's probably still not these days, to be honest. But it probably held me back a little bit as a youngster when it came to academies and going through the system. My sort of way I went about scoring runs was very unorthodox and sort of frowned upon a little bit. There was very little front elbow, very little technique. It was all sort of just want to go out and whack it from ball one. And I think T20's helped me a lot in that way to forge out a good career.
So how do you look back on your Test career in particular? 11 games, kind of moderate success or modest success. But do you look back at the way that the England Test team is playing now and think, if only that kind of environment would have been there when I started? Because my assumption would be that you were trying to play as a Test match player was perceived to have to play.
100%. I was definitely fighting a lot of my instinct opening the batting here in England. It's a very tough place to do it. I mean, you did it unbelievably well for a long time. It's a seriously tough place to open the batting. So to see the way Zach and Ben have done it this summer has been unbelievable to go out there and play their shots. Maybe looking back, if I could have gone about it in my natural way, I may have had a bit more success. But I actually think I may have been more suited to the middle order. Maybe as a middle order player with the way I like to play and go out my shots. But sort of getting into the middle order when I was trying to get into the Test team was virtually impossible because it was so strong.
Yes.
And it was similar with Notts when I was an 18, 19-year-old. You had a middle order of Dave Hussey, Mark Waugh, Samit Patel. So I've always sort of been pushed up to open the batting, maybe against what would suit my natural game. So, had I got a crack now amongst the Bazball stuff, who knows?
You retired from red ball cricket in 2018. Have you missed first-class cricket at all?
I'll be honest with you, no. I think purely just because the amount of franchise stuff there is now around the world, you're almost busy 12 months of the year. So if I'm going off to play in different countries the whole way through the winter, and you come back in April, having not had any rest and the ball swinging and seaming around, it was very difficult to balance the franchise circuit along with the 4-day stuff and wanting to get to the level that I wanted to do with T20. I found it difficult to navigate across all 3 formats. I'm definitely at peace with that decision. I do miss, when you graft really hard for a win and you're sat around with your mates having a beer afterwards. I do miss that feeling of being amongst the boys, but definitely the pros outweigh the cons for that decision for me.
And if you were 21 now, with the game as it is, would you try and be a multi-format player, or would you make a very early decision as Will
Tough
Speed
questions, yeah.
Yeah, but it's an interesting one because obviously the game is changing very rapidly. And I think if I was a young player, I mean, I wasn't a T20 player, obviously, but I'd still want to try and play across formats because that might one might help the other, and, T20 might help your first-class game as well. How do you think you would be at 21 if you had your time again now?
Yeah, just with the way I play and my instincts and my technique, I would have chucked my eggs into the T20 basket for sure. I think the
so
way
you do a Will Smeed.
I do a Will Smeed. Fair play to him for doing that. It's a bold decision. I think hopefully it works out for him. But I think the way the game is now, you're seeing fewer and fewer people who are exceptional at all 3 formats. There's obviously a select handful that are brilliant at all 3, but you see the way the game's gone, especially the last sort of 5 years, you see more and more specialists. Just because I feel I've always found the technique and skill set very different to across the formats. Bowlers looking to bowl slow and wide, Yorkers, slower bouncers, and then you go back to a 4-day game looking to hit the top of off. It's very difficult to make sure your skill set's at the top for all 3 formats.
So my guess is that you'd imagine more and more players will go that way and specialise.
If I had to guess, I'd say you'd see more and more specialists. Especially, with all the analysts and money in T20 cricket now, I think you'll just see guys trying to either prioritise red ball cricket or white ball cricket.
Can I ask about the franchise world then, which is where you're going to be then over the next few years? First of all, how easy is it for you to navigate your calendar for the year? Presumably you have an agent that you sit down with and say, I want to go here, 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 and here. And are those decisions straightforward?
Fairly straightforward, although the way it's going now, there's sort of 2 or 3 tournaments on at the same time,
yes.
Around sort of December, January, February. So, yeah, I'll sit down with my agent, try and map out what my winter looks like, where I'd like to go, where I might have to go, kind of things. Yeah, we try and get a good plan of what it's looking like, and also time off for me. The older I get now, time off for me is very important. So I try and always have like a month or 2 clump off just to refresh, and I can get homesick occasionally, so it's important for me to have that little bit of time off just to recharge the batteries.
And how easy is it to keep on top of things? I'm thinking physically, the game is part physical, part technical. When you move away from, say, a base that you would have with a county team, how easy do you find it to keep on top of things?
Fitness can be tricky, especially when you're going to different countries. You're living in hotels all the time. You're living out of a suitcase. Keeping on top of your diet can be tricky. So you kind of have to be pretty vigilant with that kind of stuff. Try and get in your top ups in the gym. You kind of have to be very independent with stuff, because you're only with your county. Like, I'm probably only with Notts maybe for 6-7 weeks of the year. So you kind of have to be very independent with your fitness and your training, and understand what you need to succeed in those environments.
And people have said, therefore, that they envisage going forward that cricketers might become like golfers, that they travel around with their own little entourage, a personal physio, personal trainer, personal S&C guy. Do you see that day not far away?
Potentially, yeah. It's definitely something that could be on the horizon. I think, well, the way it's going now, I think the Indian franchises have bought quite a few franchises across different countries. Maybe they'll look after the players all year round, so that'd be an interesting one. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if guys start looking after themselves and have their own sort of backroom staff like you see in tennis and golf.
And you've just come back from Canada, I think. You had 3 games there, if I'm right in saying?
Supposed to be 5, but we had 2 washouts.
2 washouts,
yeah.
Surrey Jaguars. Do you get the same thrill as you move from franchise to franchise to franchise as you would, say, with a team like Nottinghamshire that you might have had a connection with over a long period of time?
That can be tricky. I think you still your heart is still with Nottinghamshire and the Trent Rockets. That's still where you care deeply the most. Obviously, you want to go and win trophies, so you do give it your all every game. But yeah, that feeling of losing a game for Nottinghamshire or for Trent Rockets is very tough to beat.
And what about the upside as well? You go to these franchises, you're meeting players from all around the world, players that a previous generation, my generation, probably only saw as opponents. What about that potential upsize of the franchise kind of competitions, the close friendships formed? Yeah,
I think that is an upside. I think it's good for your cricket as well. You're rubbing shoulders with players from different nations, different backgrounds, different skill sets, and you're testing yourselves in foreign conditions, which with a lot of pressure as an overseas player as well. So people sometimes T20s have that label of sort of being the easy way out and an easy life, but with all the analysts and stuff around now, and when you're playing in these tournaments, you're the overseas player, so you're expected to score runs, you're expected to perform and contribute. So there is that pressure of having to perform in foreign conditions, and if you don't, there's a big queue of players looking to do it. So you're always having to look to top up your skill sets. As I said with analysts before, there's so much money now, so guys know the strengths and weaknesses of your game, so you have to keep developing.
Has that been one of the biggest changes, the level and depth of analysis that now goes on?
For sure, yeah. With the money in it now, coaches, analysts, opposition players know everything about you. They know where to bowl to you. They know where not to bowl to you. So you have to keep improving, and you can't just say, "Oh, these are my strengths, so I'm going to stick to them," because that's not how T20 works. They'll just find your weakness and expose it. So you have to keep looking to improve and get better, or else you get found out.
Quick couple of questions. I'm not sure how much cricket, if any, we'll get today, but the Rockets obviously defending your title from last year. What are the chances? And B, just give us an insight. Andy Flower's coach has an outstanding record as a T20 coach across franchise cricket. Just give us an insight as to why he may be so successful.
Yeah, everywhere he goes seems to perform. I think he's very thorough. He knows exactly what he wants from his players. I think he picks very well. I think he picks his teams very well, pending what the conditions are like in the country. So I think he's very thorough with his research, and he's definitely chilled out a lot over the years from his England days. So he's very mellow now, which definitely helps around the T20 world. But as a team, I'm very excited. We're obviously defending champions. We've added Sam Hain to our side, who's an unbelievable player. Dan Sams is fresh off being blast player of the tournament, I think. So we've got a very deep batting lineup, guys in some good form, so really excited for the summer.
Thanks very much for your time on a miserable day, and many congrats. It's been a fine career.
Thanks, Athers. Thanks.